Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross podcast. My name is Alyssa Globe, and once again, I'm joined by my co-host, Scott Hayward.
Hi.
How's it going, Scott?
Pretty good, Alyssa. How are you? How was the long weekend?
It was pretty good. Yeah, pretty chill. My biggest news, I guess, would be my thrift finds that I got this weekend.
Ooh, pray tell.
I know, it's so exciting. Basically, I got this IKEA Kids table and chair set for $5 from this lady who was moving, and just the realtor was coming to take her house photo. She wanted it out. Perfect condition. Abby refuses to eat in her high chair or at the table, so this is a perfect go-between. So she actually sits there. She thinks it's her own like special little spot. So
When we come to
exciting.
visit in December, is that where you're going to seat me?
Yeah, you and Abby have to go in that on that table and in a separate room.
That's right.
So we can eat in peace.
That's right. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I would not think that you would have that amount of time on your hand, given
You sound like my husband.
your busy tweets I saw over the weekend. But
Yes.
yeah, I'm sure we'll get into that. Not that you asked, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Our weekend was great.
I don't care.
Well, that's,
I'm kidding.
yeah. Are you really though? What's that old saying? There's just like a little semblance of truth in every joke.
Yeah.
It's just so weird to me. I don't know what people out there think and felt or whatever over the Labor Day weekend, but it always seems to happen to me that every Labor Day you go from like summer and then boom, it just turns, and then autumn just turns on. So for example, where my wife and I live here in Stony Creek, it was 38 on the Humidex on Saturday when I was out and about doing my grocery shopping. And then the next day we were supposed to go to, well, we still did go to a pool party Sunday afternoon. 20 degrees, raining all day, cold wind, same thing into yesterday. We're taping this on Tuesday, same thing into this morning. And now it's starting to warm up a little bit. But yeah, just like on a dime overnight, it went from summer to autumn real quick. So
Yeah.
we had a good weekend. We made the best of it at the pool party. I was stuck in the kitchen for probably an hour and a half because people kept wanting to make or drink the cocktails I was making. So I didn't really get to mix and mingle a little bit, just mixing drinks. But I can't complain. The Bombers won the Labor Day Classic in Regina, which is always huge. So they're 11-1. They clinched a playoff spot, and yeah, we were supposed to actually go to the CNE, the Canadian National Exhibition, yesterday, the last day, because I've never been before ever.
Okay.
I've been to Stampede, but I've never been to the CNE. So I said to my wife, like, oh, why don't we just hop on the GO train and go in, just to say that I've been. Our daughter, she's too young really to do the rides or anything like that. It's not like we'd spend a ton of money there anyway, but to get in is $50 between the two of us. The GO train would be $50, and it was rainy, and that's just a great invitation to get a cold for our daughter, which I really wasn't into.
Yeah.
So did I miss out, do you think, on the CNE?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so overcrowded. I mean, on a day like that, it probably wasn't, but it's so incredibly crowded. And just from my experience at the Stampede for the last 2 years, it wasn't that bad. But then this year, everything was completely opened up, and it was so overly crowded. You couldn't walk. Everything was a huge line. And I feel like that would have been the CNE because everything's wide open again in Toronto. So I don't think it would have been that great, especially if it was super hot. Like if it was a 38 day or something, like Anastasia would have went crazy. But so I think it's fine. The only time that I ever had an amazing time at the CNE was when I saw Nick Carter perform in concert.
Okay.
That was
Is that when you got to greet him, or is that a different time?
No, that was a different time.
Okay, well, I think that's
Anywho.
pretty good for our weekend updates. Before we go down this Nick Carter rabbit hole and how many times you've seen him and met him or whatever it is, that could be a podcast unto itself.
He kissed my cheek, but yeah. Okay, so today's episode is brought to you by LaRosse Media. They make professional videos to fit any budget. So next time you need a commercial, promo, or corporate video, think LaRosse. Check them out at larossemedia.com. Okay, so we have a couple topics today, one of which Scott alluded to with my tweeting. There is a United Conservative Party leadership race happening here in Alberta. And so about a week and a half ago on August 25th, the Alberta Prosperity Project and Rebel News hosted an open forum with the candidates. And so Todd Lowen, Brian Jean, and Danielle Smith all attended. Rebecca Schultz and Travis Taves were going to attend but canceled last minute because they didn't agree with the whole Alberta Separation, Sovereignty Act situation going on. And they thought that was too close with that issue, so they didn't go to the open forum. I don't agree with that. Like, I think that any open forum, any open space that, you should discuss these topics and talk about why you don't agree,
Yeah, that's
so that
kind of
people can
lame.
understand. Yeah, so I wasn't too thrilled with that. I don't like politicians that don't answer questions and don't do news media scrums and whatever. Anyway, that's a separate note. So the three of these candidates were at this leadership forum, and the topic of biological males competing in female sports came up. Despite the fact that this isn't a huge issue in Canada per se, like it's gotten a lot more airtime in the States, it did come up, which I think is important because it is an issue that people do care about. And so, interestingly, Danielle Smith was the only candidate in attendance who said that biological men should be allowed to participate in women's sports in some instances. So, she suggested that testing testosterone levels would determine that. And she also said that she had a non binary family member. So, to me, that is an important fact because she's not just talking about it from a policy standpoint, it's more of a personal standpoint. So it is more difficult to kind of penetrate when you do have a family member or something like that, that's either had an abortion. There's a lot of MLAs that have had abortions here, and you're just not going to convince them at this point of the pro-life issue and of the pro-life side. But anyway, so then Brian Jean and Todd Lowen both said that it's common sense that they shouldn't be allowed to play in these sports. And Lowen said that it's pretty simple. Men competing against men and women competing against women is fair, and how it's been done for thousands of years. So, of course, that created an uproar with the NDP because it's interesting here in Alberta. The NDP is way more left than I think that the NDP is anywhere else in the country. So the more conservative that a province is, to me, the more left-leaning the left-leaning parties are. And so we have a cabinet minister and an MLA here in Edmonton named Janice Irwin. She's some sort of cabinet minister for LGBTQ issues.
Or
And so
was
she
it, or
tweeted,
was a cabinet minister at least, right? Like
yeah,
not
I don't.
not present
Oh,
tense. Yeah.
not present day,
Yeah.
obviously, like shadow cabinet, whatever. But she's the person that's always speaking up about these issues. When I actually spoke at the March for Life back in May, she was the sole MLA that was counter protesting, holding up a rainbow colored sign that said, "I can't believe I still have to protest this shit." So that's the type of politician that she is, just to give everybody an understanding. So she tweeted that it's absolutely unacceptable that someone who wants to be premier of our province is sharing transphobic views. I call on all candidates to denounce this hate and to tell us how each of you plans to support and uplift the 2SLGBTQ plus community. And so there was also another tweet where she posted a TikTok video of her taking a photo at a boardwalk that had the trans flag on it. And so she wrote, "For anyone who needs to hear this, know that you are loved, you are seen, you matter, trans rights are human rights." So at this point, I decided to respond to her because not a lot of people were voicing an alternative point of view, because she does have her sort of army, her supporters that really encompass her and support her. And a lot of times on Twitter, especially, it's counterproductive to even get into these topics. But I just, it's an issue we've talked about more and more on this podcast that's affecting, I think my life more now that I have kids. And so I just responded, "For anyone who needs to hear this, no, this is not love. You are seen, you matter, do your research before making irreversible life-altering decisions." And I posted this link of the article that I mentioned last week of this TikTok user who talked about how her gender reassignment surgery ruined her life. So then that was fine. I wasn't getting much traction, but then Janice responded to me and she said, "You don't need to be like this, Alyssa." And because I think she responded and there was this sort of conversation that was starting, then everyone started to jump on my tweets, go through my Twitter. I thought for sure that I was going to get kicked off Twitter because, the Babylon Bee, Seth Dillon, other American outlets have been suspended off Twitter because of this specific issue. like they dead name, certain individuals or call them by their wrong gender, according to Twitter. And so I responded, Janice making a 16-second TikTok video is the ultimate way of virtue signaling. What I want to know is, what's your message to people like Crispy, see the article I linked, and others whose lives are ruined and have severe trauma, ongoing health issues because of the ideology you promote? And so then, this ongoing for about 36 hours, it was pretty intense conversation. I was responding to a lot of people who were tweeting at me, which I know that probably would have died down if I wasn't doing that, but because I was doing that, a lot more conversations were happening. And, this seems to be, just on a political level, a wedge issue to a certain extent that's happening within the United Conservative Party leadership race, but it wasn't covered that much. And I think that if people did know specifically where Danielle Smith stood as compared to the other two, it would be a much bigger deal. But I think the only kind of news outlet that covered it was True North Center, Andrew Lawton network, and then Janice's tweet shed some light, but even still there wasn't that much news associated with her tweet. So I find that this conversation is very interesting, that it's coming to Canada, and I'm glad that these politicians were saying this shouldn't happen here. Do you think that this is going to make a difference in the leadership race? Like, what's your opinion on this?
Well, it depends. such a non-concrete answer. And the reason that it depends if it's going to be picked up in the media at all. So is the Rebel going to cover that? Is True North Center going to cover it a little bit more? National Telegraph, CTV, Global, CPC, all that stuff in Alberta, all those Albertan news outlets, are they actually going to cover it? So it kind of reminds me a little bit of the federal leadership race for the Conservative Party of Canada, where if, let's say, for some independent media that their perception of the leading candidate doesn't say something or says something that doesn't quite fit the narrative that a lot of their readers would like that person to be within, then they don't cover it, right? So Danielle Smith does seem to be, maybe not to the same extent, but does seem to be kind of the darling of the independent media within Alberta for the most part. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. And so she is way offside, I would say, with the average Albertan, the average Canadian, just probably the average person around the world on this specific issue. And so that's probably
and others.
Yeah. And so that's probably something that the independent media, specifically in Alberta, don't want to bring light to. So then why I say it depends is because if that's the case, then it's incumbent upon other candidates, like her opponents within the race, to highlight that difference. And if that's something they want to pursue, then it can be a wedge issue, probably in a positive manner for them. I think the ballots for the leadership race in Alberta just went out over the weekend. So they should be landing in people's mailboxes soon. So there's still an opportunity to do some differentiation between the candidates on an issue like this, if you'd like. And, this is an issue that it already is in Canada. It's starting to grow. Maybe it isn't to the extent that it is in the United States, or certainly in the United Kingdom. And we talked about that the other week with Jonathan, about some of the clinics down in the United States and the United Kingdom, what's happening there, especially with kids. So it really is an opportunity for others. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Brian Jean, did he send out an email about it? Or
he did.
Okay.
Yes, he did.
He did, right? So, you do have candidates that are highlighting that difference, which is just so strange to me that Brian Jean, of all candidates, is highlighting that difference. But if they want to pursue it, I think it can make a difference. I don't think it would be necessarily the end all be all difference, but I mean, this is politics, and every little bit counts toward a victory or to not a victory.
Yeah, I really don't see this being. I think this is going to go multiple rounds here in Alberta. So little wedge issues like this could make a difference. It could change people's minds and votes. For those of you who didn't hear it, please go listen to episode 12 with Jonathan Van Maren. Definitely go back and listen to that, because he is incredibly knowledgeable and has done tons of research on this specific topic. And we covered a lot of ground. So definitely go check that out, because we're not going to get too far into it today. But I will say it was kind of interesting, because on the heels of me getting into these discussions and debates, this photo went viral, and it was of this gender reassignment surgeon in Miami, Florida, who posted a photo of herself posing with a 13-year-old girl whom she just performed a double mastectomy on. And there was one photo of her posing with this girl, and then another photo of her mom posing with her. And the caption, if you will, was I just yeeted the teats or something. So this TikTok gender reassignment surgeon goes around, does all these TikToks talking about the different surgeries she does specifically on minors and tweens and teens. In one TikTok video, she said that in 1 week in 2020, she performed 22 double mastectomies in 1 week. In another video, she lamented at only performing 4 in 1 week. So
because she's not making enough money.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, that's what it's really all about. She probably can give less of a shit about what happens to those people, those minors long term. It's all about the dollar bills, right? It's all about getting that insurance money or getting that surgery money.
And it was really interesting because a lot of the feedback from my conversations with Janice Irwin and her supporters was that this does not happen to minors. This does not happen to people under the age of 18. And then this photo emerged, and despite the fact that it wasn't in Canada, this does happen. And so I responded with the photo, and then people were outraged that this photo was on the internet, as if I had taken it and posted it. So I was like, if you want to report that, or if you're upset about this photo, then go to Dr. Gallagher's TikTok, because there's a lot more where that came from. She's the one posting this information and these photos of these, people that she's mutilating.
People didn't believe the photo was real. I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw some people were like, well, this isn't real. And then other people were saying, well, go to her Instagram, because there's tons and tons and tons of more. Yeah, this is where we talked about that with Jonathan. And yeah, you can check out our podcast from 2 weeks ago. I thought it was a great episode. I had a lot of fun with him. And it's always great when we have Jonathan on. It's always great when the three of us hang out, period. But I truly believe that this is the train stop where people get off the train. Like, this is a little bit of a bridge too far. And we'll talk about that a little bit this episode, and what happens when the political left does go a bridge or several bridges too far. But I believe this is one of them. So yeah, like, it's pretty late in the leadership race in Alberta for it to become a major political issue, I think. But it's an issue that's not going to go away. So, if you are Pierre Poliver, if you are Daniel Smith or Travis Taves or Brian Jean, if you're Scott Moe, if you're whomever, whatever kind of conservative leader up here in Canada, just know that this is an issue that's not going to go away. Just like the issue of abortion is not going to go away. You can wish it to not talk about it all you want, but it's not going to happen. So you might as well have a proper response to it.
Now, I just want to pause this right now and just talk about our pronunciation of Pierre's last name, because I have gotten quite a few comments about this. Now, for those wondering why we pronounce it differently, Scott anglicizes it. I haven't really heard too many people say Poliver, though.
I don't know. It's my understanding, I could be wrong, but that is kind of his family, and that's the way they pronounced it, because they're from Calgary, and then when he moved to Ottawa, he changed it to Polivier. Yeah, I always just pronounce it Poliver, and I mean, I people, that might upset people, it might not, I don't know, but
and then some people do say what you like, the French way, like Polivier, and then some people just say Poliev, because it's like an anglicized French version.
It's kind of in between. Yeah.
So I'm not. What do they say in that? We should look up what they say in the House of Commons, like what the speaker says. Do you know what he says?
I think it depends if you have a francophone and anglophone as a speaker. To be honest, I've heard it all three ways.
So haters are going to hate. We're going to say it the way that we're comfortable saying it.
Maybe Pierre will come onto our podcast, and we could just have an interview specifically on that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
To be fair, we really should find out what way he does prefer. It is his name, not my name. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada, from coast to coast to coast.
And we're back. We'll move on to our next topic, which is a story coming out of the United States. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about how this will, and if this will affect Canada. And basically, the Democrats, right before Roe v. Wade was overturned, petitioned Google to censor their Google searches so that those looking for abortion clinics or abortion practices would not be confronted with crisis pregnancy centers in their Google searches. And so a few months after they petitioned the Google to do this and Roe v. Wade was overturned, they recently are rolling out an update to only show verified abortion providers in their local search results. And so these Democrats are saying that, they're celebrating that these women won't be confronted with fake clinics, and even Google Maps is doing this as well. So when users type the words abortion clinic into Maps, crisis pregnancy centers account for a quarter of the top 10 search results previously, and now they won't account for any. So it's also interesting because in the States, abortion clinics are estimated to about 3 to 1 with crisis pregnancy centers. So there are three times as many crisis pregnancy centers as abortion clinics. And even in publications here recently, they talked about how there are more abortion crisis pregnancy centers in Canada than abortion clinics as well. This must obviously affect Canada as well, just because they're going to do this whole filter, I think, in general, for Google. I haven't tried it or tested it, but, you've been doing some in-depth work with your crisis pregnancy center that you sit on the board of. Are you guys worried about this? Are you concerned? Because this is kind of where the next step was going with these crisis pregnancy centers, because these bubble zones are being implemented. You couldn't really target or talk to women directly. The Google searches and online search engines and ads online and social media ads and all that is where it was at to really confront women and say there is another option other than abortion. So this is kind of the direction of crisis pregnancy centers, but now big tech is basically censoring that so that women actually don't have options except for abortion.
Yeah, this is something that will affect crisis pregnancy centers in Canada. There's no doubt about it. And not just in Canada and the United States, but like you said, Alyssa, probably around the world, specifically with the Anglosphere. It's a bit scary. It's a bit concerning. But I mean, like, we as an organization right now have dealt with the negative effects of big tech for quite some time. It used to be, for example, that we would have just a petition on, restricting abortion in terms of sex selective abortions or late term abortions. We put like $30, $40, $50 into Facebook ads, and we would get 1,000 new people into our database through those petition signatures online. Those days are well behind us. Like, that's like 4 years ago now, almost. And so, when I started sitting on the board of this crisis pregnancy center in downtown Toronto, and they were kind of moving in this direction in lieu of the bubble zone legislation that came under Kathleen Wynne that still has not been reversed by the Doug Ford government and was voted in favor of by Patrick Brown and a lot of those quote-unquote conservatives back in the end of 2017. They actually saw an increase in the number of women coming through the crisis pregnancy centers in Ontario, specifically the one that I sit on the board of, when they started utilizing social media, specifically Google AdWords. So yeah, this will be a negative effect. This is something I brought to the attention of the board for quite some time. I don't quite know what the answer is. I know it's something that they've been working on in terms of like the actual staff of the crisis pregnancy center that I volunteer with. But, I think at the end of the day, no matter what the government does, no matter what big tech does, and we were talking about this with some legal counsel too earlier this summer, no matter what happens, no matter how much they come to clamp down on our activities of trying to help women and their preborn children, not just during pregnancy, but also post-pregnancy, we will always do that. There will always be a need for it. I think at the end of the day, women will seek us out. And if we can try to be where they're seeking us out as much as humanly possible, we will always have a lot of women that come through our center. So any organization that doesn't fall into the political leftist ideology, which frankly does include a lot of like small L liberals these days, like people like Bill Maher and even you can argue people like Dr. Peterson, you really, really have to not be so reliant on Facebook or Twitter or even Instagram, although Instagram did shut down Pornhub the other day, so it does go both ways, or Google AdWords and different organizations, whether you be political or not political, you're going to have to kind of wean yourself off of big tech. I guess my question is to you, Alyssa, is do you think, and this is a little bit tangential, but I just kind of see this potentially going in this direction in the next few years. Do you think that the emergence of, let's call it alternate big tech that's more more in favor of freedom of expression, do you think that there's going to be an opportunity for a lot of people to kind of go in that direction? Do you think there will be a couple of YouTube alternatives or Facebook alternatives or Twitter alternatives, or do you think that these existing big tech companies are already so mammoth and so large that there won't be an opportunity for, let's call it a transition sometime in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I think this answer is twofold because I find it interesting, again, in the United States, that Mark Zuckerberg was on the Joe Rogan podcast recently, and he talked specifically about the election. And Mark Zuckerberg said that the FBI approached Facebook and told them to suppress stories about Hunter Biden laptop stories during the election. So it was, to me, pretty clear election interference. What that means exactly, I'm not sure. But when you have government entities that are saying suppress these stories, and then these big tech guys are coming out and exploiting that, I think that's really important because the backlash was so extreme. Like, it's unbelievable that actually happened. And so I think that there will be people leaving en masse. I kind of envision it the same way as the mainstream media. Like, a lot of independent media sites have more views and are watched more now than the mainstream media. Like, even politicians who have rallies, side by side with official debates, but they live stream their rallies on different networks, are viewed way more times in live viewings than in the actual mainstream media. So I think that people are looking more and more towards independent media. Obviously, these other social media, like Rumble and Telegram and places like that aren't as highly populated yet, but the more suppression and the more this stuff goes on, I think the more people will flood to them. And because of that, I think that Twitter and Facebook and these social media big tech guys will be forced to no longer suppress as much. I'm not really sure about Google, though, because I guess that's a whole different thing. And I think that Google plays a way more important role than social media to a certain extent because everybody uses Google, and I myself don't even like using, a different search engine because I just find it more irritating. So they also need to create web browsers and social media platforms that are as easily user-friendly as these other ones, because then people will flood to them even more. So I think it's like a practical side, an ideological side. And I do see, they will go too far. And I think that this Hunter Biden suppression story is part of that. I mean, I can't even imagine what they suppress here in Canada. It's when I do some research for this podcast, sometimes I try to find specific stories and cannot for the life of me find them anywhere on Google, and have to specifically go to the websites where I know that they would be and then type it in their search engine to actually find the information. So I know that it is happening in Canada as well. maybe not to that as big of an extent, but it is definitely concerning. But like you said, I think women will always be seeking an alternative. It kind of reminds me of the story of when you and I were doing our presentations all across the country, and we went to a donor's house who organized a presentation for us in like rural Manitoba, and they had a modest house and it was a single breadwinning family. And he was a good big donor to us, and wanted to give us more, but he couldn't because he had single handedly bought another house in rural Manitoba, specifically for girls who became pregnant, who had unexpected pregnancies, who were kicked out of their house, where they could go live and be taken care of and taught how to take care of their babies and given shelter and everything that they need, basically. And I had no idea this even existed until I went to this man's house, who was the person who bought this house. So there are places like this that do exist. I know in my hometown in Sarnia, a place like this just opened up as well, where women could go to live in a house. So, word of mouth will spread. There will be organizations that do support this kind of work and will direct women there. And I think I think the more that you are attacked, the more we will succeed, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and if you look at like social movements dealing with human rights in the past, and not even in that far in the past, like only in the past, let's say 150, 200 years, when there is incredible government suppression upon those social movements, they still found a way to succeed. And it's those stories that we remember. You think of the Underground Railroad to get escapee slaves out from the southern states up through the north and then into Canada, because in the British Empire specifically, here in Ontario and Upper Canada was one of the very first places in the Anglosphere where slavery was outright abolished. And you look at social movements such as for child labor laws to bring those into place. Like we just went past Labor Day. This is one of the things that Labor Day was big for back in the late 1800s. One of the biggest, most successful things about that movement is they had photographers going into different, mines and different manufacturing plants, taking pictures of children who had, their fingers mangled and were working 12, 18-hour days and things of this nature. And they were able to disseminate that information despite a lot of the press not wanting to publish those photos. They were able to get it out through just individual canvassing and flyers and town squares and things like that. And once people saw these images, that was a huge movement in the late 1800s, early 1900s for massive and very positive reforms to child labor laws, and that, you can't use kids to climb into machines to clean. That's illegal. So I think it will evolve. It will definitely make the pro-life movement a lot more intelligent and a lot more responsive. And so it doesn't really matter I'm not advocating for government to keep suppressing the pro-life movement, whether it be through big tech or through bubble zone legislation and things like that. But I mean, kind of like bring it, I guess. It's not going to stop us. Like we're still going to help women, and we're going to still help their babies, and we're going to help them not just through their pregnancy, but also so that they can be as best of mothers as they can, and they can have as healthy and successful as families as possible. So that's never going to go away ever.
Well, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the Chilean Constitution. Stay tuned.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larosmedia.com
and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
And we're back. So our last and final topic is about an interesting situation that happened in Chile, specifically surrounding students who kind of created this uprising that changed the constitution of Chile. So I'm just going to throw it over to Scott because he was the one who brought this story to my attention. It's very intriguing and also encouraging and discouraging at the same time. But Scott, yeah, take it away.
Yeah, like most things in life, it's a bit of a mix. So like, I came across this on Twitter, and someone I follow had tweeted like, "Oh, like what a great victory in Chile," and I was thinking, "Oh, I thought they had like a crazy leftist government. What does this mean?" So I'm going to back things up a little bit because I didn't really know about this till this weekend. And it's kind of interesting. One, like we're always so focused on what's happening in the United States, or maybe to a lesser extent, the United Kingdom or continental Europe. But we should really pay attention to our side of the ocean and what's happening in the southern part of our continent in Latin America, because I think what I'm about to say, a lot of people could kind of sort of see something similar happening here in North America, or have seen something similar happen in North America, whether it be in individual states over the past few years, or perhaps in different provinces. But anywho, back in 2019, in Santiago, which is the capital of Chile, they had a 4% increase in bus fares. Nothing too crazy. 4% maybe a little bit more steep than what a lot of people would expect. But all of a sudden, there was these massive uprising of students, both secondary and post-secondary students, that said, this increase was way out of whack. The inequality in our country is way out of whack, which may or may not be the case. They were saying that, for a lot of people who are on minimum wage in Santiago, if they even want to take public transit, that accounts for something like 13% of their expenses. And then that was, way too much. So all these protests, it started in Santiago, but then it spread throughout the cities and it was organized. And so there was a right-wing government in power at the time. And for some time since 1980, there's been talk in Chile about whether or not they should have a new constitution. So they were under a military dictatorship under General Pinochet back as late as the 1980s. And that's when they brought in their constitution. So they're thinking, well, we should really vote on our constitution. And so finally, the government said, okay, we will have a referendum on whether or not we want to amend our constitution. And so they did that in 2019, and something like 75 or 80% of people said, yes, let's take a look at the constitution. And then basically the same percentage said that we should vote people onto the Constitution Committee that would write the proposed constitution that we would then go back to the people for a referendum. So they said yes to that. In 2021, they voted the members of this committee that would basically rewrite the Constitution and propose it. And then they just released it here in 2022. And in the meantime, there was a presidential election, and one of the student leaders from Santiago back in 2019 was recently elected as president of Chile, and his party won I think together with the other left-wing parties, won a parliamentary majority in Chile. So like everything was going their way. Well, this constitution was presented to the people this summer. They had a vote on it on Sunday, on the 4th. Over 85% of eligible electors voted, which is a huge turnout rate. And the proposed constitution was rejected by a margin of 62% to 38%, which is really massive considering, they voted that they wanted a new constitution. They voted, basically left-wingers to be on this constitution committee last year. And then when they presented them this constitution, it was outright rejected. So here are some of the things that were included in the proposed Chilean constitution. One proposal was that nature would be granted rights, basically the same rights as people. So I don't know how that would work with, creating, parks or, creating beaches or stuff like that. Like how does nature represent itself in court? I don't know, but nature would have rights. Animals are subjects of special protection. And this sounded like it would go beyond like animal cruelty, which I think probably most people are against. You don't beat up, your pet dog or whatever. I think this kind of leads into something that frankly Leslie Lewis has been talking about for a little bit in food security, specifically dealing with there's a movement out there for not just encouraging people to eat less meat, but basically restricting people from consuming meat. Fighting climate change would just always be something that the government always has to do. So basically they're taking like policy directives that their political party would have and inserting into the constitution. That would be like the Conservative Party of Canada putting into the constitution saying you always have to build forever, like at least 15 pipelines every year. You know, you're taking a policy directive, putting in your constitution. State bodies and public companies would have to have gender parity. So within the legislative assemblies, within boards of directors for publicly traded companies. And the most important one that should really concern us all is that it would enshrine in their constitution a right to abortion. Chile is one of the countries in the world, one of the few countries in the world that basically have a complete restriction on abortion unless the life of the mother is in jeopardy. Chile has one of the highest maternal mortality rates, along with Poland and Malta. So this would be a huge, huge change in Chile. So anyways, basically all the crazy leftist dreams that exist amongst like the extreme Democrats in the United States, the extreme liberal in the NDP in Canada, were put into this document. It was presented to the people. Basically, every single person came out and voted, and a massive majority rejected it outright. Alyssa, I think it's a really, really good lesson of when the left take things just a little bit too far. In this case, I think a lot of it too far.
Yeah, but I mean, on the other hand, how organized was the left to do this?
Right.
Like, think of how mammoth this is. Like, to actually take something like an issue of increasing bus rates and getting it to the point where you're changing the entire country's constitution. Like, that's just insane to me that they were able to actually get it that far. So if they weren't as crazy as you described, they actually would have done it.
Yeah,
which is nuts.
If they had half the things that they proposed in the constitutional amendment, it probably would have went through, maybe still by a small majority. They also made it far easier to amend the Constitution so that it didn't have to be through this specially elected committee through referenda. It would have just been through their upper and lower houses. They're going to take a ton of power away from the Senate and basically make it almost like a rubber stamp, more or less. There were quite significant changes, and you're right. Like we could disagree with a lot of those on the political left and the policies that they want to pursue. But one thing that I think we could all probably learn from is their tactics, at least their ethical tactics. And you're right. Like to take from, our bus fare went up 4% to we're going to completely remake the country in our own image where we have to fight climate change forever and always. That's some crazy stuff. Also a good lesson in here, I would say, is, there was a right-wing government in power at the time in Chile and Santiago when these protests were occurring. And I don't really know much about the right-wing political parties in Chile, and I don't know how strong or how weak they are, where they stand on specific issues. But that's also another lesson, is that when the political right gives the extreme political left an inch, they take a mile. And so to always, stick to your principles, have your talking points, have excellent communication skills, professionalize yourselves, organize yourselves, because I think this is a good lesson for both, again, the political right not to give the extreme left, or even the political left not to get the extreme left, an inch so they take a mile, as well as to learn from them and, basically how to organize. One little last quick thing I would say is, I do want to make a distinction between, the general left-wing politicians and the extreme left, because you're talking about the NDP in Alberta and how they're way more left-wing generally than, especially culturally, than a lot of the other NDP parties provincially across Canada. You even look like in Ontario, they're much more labor-based. You look in British Columbia, like a lot of the COVID restrictions they brought in BC were basically the same as Alberta. Now, I'm not saying that what Alberta or BC did was right, but you compare, what the NDP in BC did compared to a lot of other, even conservative governments across Canada, and they weren't nearly as extreme. So I just want to make that distinction there as well.
Yeah, I always used to use Chile as an example in my high school presentations when people were talking about back alley abortions, because like you said, Chile, Poland, Malta had extremely low maternal mortality rates compared to places like the US and even Canada that had higher ones that had abortion on demand up until birth. So just that argument statistically doesn't hold up. So that would have been just such an astronomical change for them to go from such restrictive abortion laws with a low maternal mortality rate to then putting it in their constitution that it's a right, which is just nuts. Imagine that happening here in Canada in the reverse.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's just, wow, what a story. I'm glad that you brought that to my attention, because I never would have known otherwise. And that is pretty huge. It kind of reminds me of like the Egyptian kind of revolution that happened starting on Facebook. But just like these things, these huge things that start on social media from the younger generation is impressive and also scary to a certain extent. But, you know, we have to obviously take part in it just as well as they, like you said. But on that note, we're going to go to our final segment.
Random Canadian Fact of the Day.
Because we are a Canadian podcast, obviously I wanted to do a random Canadian fact of the day. Okay, let's both do one today,
Okay.
and then we can maybe go back and forth, because there are a lot of really cool random facts about Canada. But this one I found particularly interesting. So my random fact of the day is that in Dawson City, Yukon, you can drink a toe. So there's a cocktail where people drink whiskey with a human toe inside. It is called the Sour Toe Cocktail, and people donate toes that have fallen off due to frostbite or other means. There's a $2,500 fine if you swallow the toe. When people accidentally swallow the toe, Good Samaritans donate newly severed toe to drink.
Wow. How much is a cocktail?
I don't know. Hopefully it covers some of that fine, because I mean,
Is there any way that we
sometimes things
can
happen.
go to Dawson City for right now event?
I know. We've never been to we've always talked about going to the Northwest Territories.
COVID did delay it, but we will
Yeah.
we'll get up to any of the 3 territories sometime
And
in
we
the
will
next little
go
bit.
and see where this we will go to Dawson City. So if there's anyone listening from Dawson City, get ready for us, because we're coming.
Hopefully we don't have an opportunity to donate a toe either. We'll go in the
Please, no.
summer. We'll go in the summer.
Yeah. Okay, what's your fact?
Okay, mine isn't nearly as interesting. I thought we were doing like kind of like a Canadian Pride, which I don't know, maybe that is like a Canadian Pride fact. But my fact of the day was that in the Second World War, at the end of the war, Canada had the 3rd largest navy in the world.
Whoa.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that.
That's
Now,
interesting. Yeah.
it does include what's called the merchant navy. So these were private ships that companies owned that often would transport goods, you know, between Canada, the United States, the Caribbean, and of course, United Kingdom. A lot of those ships were then rolled into the Royal Canadian Navy. A lot of them did the convoys in between, you know, Halifax and St. John's, New York, all the way to London to transport, of course, goods and equipment and people to stage for Operation Overlord. That's D-Day on June 6, 1944. A lot of them were sunk by U-boats. They also sunk a lot of U-boats. Yeah, but at the end of the war, Canada had the 3rd largest navy in the world. I believe after the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union. I think the Americans were number 4, but I might be wrong on that. So anyway, there's your Canadian fact of the day.
And then if a lot of those veterans were still alive today, we would just offer them physician-assisted suicide.
Yeah, apparently.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. How sad.
That's a topic for next podcast. But that is a fascinating. That I would never have known, because whenever we think of Canadian military, we don't really think large or big or prominent.
Yeah,
so.
like how sad has it gone that we had the 3rd
Yeah.
largest navy in the world, and now we have 4 submarines that every time they leave the dock, they seem to sink. So
Yeah. Okay, well, that wraps up our podcast for this week. Thanks so much for joining us. Next week, we'll hopefully have a few more guests on for you, talking about post-leadership after the Conservative Party elects their new leader this Saturday, amongst other topics facing our country. So thank you so much for joining us. Make sure that you subscribe to us on YouTube, on Rumble, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, basically anywhere you listen to podcasts, so you don't miss an episode. Please make sure that you review us also. And you can give us a follow at Right Now HQ, either on Twitter or on Facebook. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
bye for now.